The element of surprise to your advantage. As a survivor of spiritual abuse and most likely other types of abuse and toxic behavior, you have to make sure that you move through the world with a certain awareness and a certain amount of defensiveness, healthy defensiveness. And one of the ways you do this is that you figure out how you can get advantages in situations where you might otherwise be harmed. And I'm going to talk about how specifically you can use the element of surprise to do this when you are in a spiritually abusive environment. Now, you might be listening to this and wondering, well, what does surprise have to do with anything? And why would I want to use that? I first want to talk about what surprise does and how you can use it to your advantage. I've talked before in my videos about how spiritually abusive environments do a lot of things to manipulate other people and control them. One way they do this is by using surprise. And so they might ask you something on the spot. And when you are caught off guard like that, then, many times you might just react and give a knee-jerk response instead of the actual thing that you want to do, right? So abusive and manipulative people use surprise as a way of controlling people, getting an advantage over them, and things like that. Now, you can see that and use that to your advantage. The first way, obviously, that you would do that is by being prepared as much as you can for surprises and not giving in to times where people are trying to manipulate you. But you can also use that as an offensive weapon and use surprise yourself to gauge the reactions of certain people. One thing about spiritually abusive people and abusive people in general is that they're very entitled. And no one is going to come out with a flag waving, hey, guess what? I am an entitled person. Stay away from me. Nobody does that. A lot of people who are also, who are abusive, like I talked about, lack self-awareness. And when I say they lack self-awareness, it is not something to say, oh, feel sorry for them. It's the thing they can't do. Anyone can learn to be self-aware, but people who act in these ways choose not to, is what my belief is. So being aware of this, you can use surprise to your advantage. Um, as you're moving through your spiritually abusive environment, you want to be very careful to move in silence. So, I've made some videos on this, but people will go about leaving the wrong way and they'll make big announcements or they'll, argue back and forth with people about why they're justified in leaving. And those are things you don't want to do. Okay. If you want to leave, then leave. If you want to stay, stay, but it's not something that needs to be debated or argued or justified to anybody. You can use the element of surprise, though, to figure out who's in your corner and who's not. So the next time you have a big decision in your life that you're making, I'm going to encourage you to hold off and not say anything to anybody. Maybe and obviously there are going to be some people that need to know, maybe if it's your family that you're moving with, obviously you're going to need to know that you're moving or making a big decision, but hold off on telling people for a while. And then I want you to tell the people and I want you to see their reaction, right? People who are in your corner might be a little bit taken aback, but they're going to support you. However, people that are entitled are not going to have the same reaction. And it's going to be something very subtle that you need to look for, but it's important nonetheless. So let's say you announce that you're moving, right? And you might tell person A, and let's call person A like, Adam or something. So you tell Adam you're moving, and Adam's like, wow, that's great. I'm surprised, but that's awesome. You talk about the move, and there's a genuine back and forth exchange. And while Adam might be surprised, Adam is, asking how they can support you in the move and things like that. And then let's say you tell person B, and let's say person B, we'll call person B Brian, okay? You tell Brian that you're moving, and Brian gets a weird look on his face, and he might be like, "Oh, you're moving." And you see that face I made, like it's kind of like suppressing something. And so people tell on themselves a lot. And one way that they do that is through, small expressions. They're called micro expressions. But you'll probably notice that Brian might act a little offended, right? But they're trying to like hold that back and to be like, "Oh, you're moving? Well, when did you know you were moving?" And then, you tell them, "Oh, well, we bought a house. We closed on the house like a month ago, and actually we're already there now. We just wanted to let you know so that that whatever mail you forward, to our old address, it's going to come back to you," something like that. And then Brian starts asking you, "Well, what made you decide to move? Why did you move? Are you, did you tell any of us that you're moving? What church are you going to be going to? Is it out of state?" Like they go into this thing of like inquiring a lot. Almost feels like they're giving you the third degree. And so you might wonder why they're doing that. And what that pattern of behavior reveals is entitlement. What Brian is telling you is that he feels that you should have told him before making that decision and involved him in the decision making. And a lot of spiritually abusive people act this way. As an adult, you make decisions on your own. Now, you can choose to like get the input of certain people that you trust, but spiritually abusive people expect to be part of the decision-making process in your life. They want to know what you're doing, when you're doing it, why you're doing it, and they also want you to involve them in the process. And so Brian is expecting you or expected you to bring them in from day one and ask, "Is this okay for us to move? What do you think?" All this other stuff. And a lot of you have talked about this in the comments and also the lives that I've done, that when you've made major decisions in your life, people in spiritually abusive environments have had a lot of pushback. People have told me some awful stories about how they are, going to college, and, the pastor or whoever is part of the staff is like, "You shouldn't go. You didn't ask us. It's going to be bad for you to leave the state. You should be here working for us," all kinds of just foolish nonsense. And the point is, once you become an adult, you are responsible for your own decisions. And spiritually abusive people don't particularly like that. They want a say, and they want to be able to control the outcome of your life to their benefit. And so by you talking about a decision that you made on your own without getting their input, it shows that you are your own person. And spiritually abusive people and abusive people in general don't like that. They're not going to kind of tell you that, but they're going to use other weaponized language to shame you for that. And they might say, "Well, you should get counsel before making such a big decision," and stuff like that. And yeah, it's true. It makes sense to ask people you trust, and people you trust and people you value, whose input you value. But they're saying, "Look, we want to know what's going on." That's why a lot of spiritually abusive environments seem like they're always keeping tabs on people. I remember in one live that I did probably a few months ago, one of you in the comment section had talked about how you were in a situation with leadership, and leadership was like wanting you to give very specific details about the people in the group you were leading. Like you would just say something like, "Oh, they X, Y, and Z people attended this week, and that's that." But the person was like, "No, you need to get more information." They wanted like very specific details about people, and that's not normal or healthy in any environment, right? That's pretty much like that person was being asked to spy on the congregation on behalf of the pastor. And so when you use the element of surprise, what you are doing is basically like forcing someone's hand in a sense. And the way they react is going to tell you whether they feel entitled to your resources and your decisions. And again, I always say on this channel that you have to be able to think in nuance. There are always exceptions to every rule. And if, I'm going to start dealing with that stuff, if I see that in the comment sections, because I've seen people say some things that I can just tell that you are being willfully obtuse. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Okay. But back to my point at hand, you have to, when you do something like this, and when you say, okay, look, this is a big decision I've made, and you tell somebody and it's a surprise to them, their reaction reveals how they view your relationship. In the first case, when I talked about somebody named Adam and how Adam responded, Adam might would have was caught off guard, but they weren't trying to like change anything or gain any sort of advantage in that situation. It's like, oh, I didn't know. That's cool. Tell me more about it. Whereas the other person, Brian, was asking all these questions. And not only that, they seemed irritated. They seemed like they were trying to hold something back. And so that's how you can use the element of surprise to your advantage. That will show you who's not in your corner and who you need to be aware of, right? People have told me about how when they've made major decisions that all of a sudden they had emails from people. Maybe they left a church and then they got some nasty emails from the people at their old church, or maybe they, made some move, got married, sold a house, bought a house, whatever, just a big decision that the abusive people felt entitled to be a part of. And so you'll see that one of the biggest mistakes you can make, though, is doing the opposite and involving too many people in the process of what you do. Spiritually abusive environments and people groom you to be dependent on them in the system. And so it's going to be difficult to break that habit, but you need to learn to do that. And one way you can do that is just by moving in silence altogether and then reveal what you've done at the end. Now, you have to use your own judgment in these types of situations. It might not work and it might not, and it actually might backfire, right? And so you have to use your critical thinking skills to determine what the best course of action is. And I also, provide consultations around that. So you can book one with me for more information. And I've walked people, clients through like the best ways to deal with that from a detailed perspective that's kind of like unique to their own situation. Again, it's just advice. No, you can obviously do what you want, but again, the point of all of this is to reveal less about yourself. And then as you are revealing information about your decisions and whatnot, look at how people react. And another thing with the element of surprise is that it's not something that you want to mess up by using a lot of justification. So let's say you move, you would just say, oh, we moved and just wanted to let you know. And then, if the person asks why, you don't even have to give them a reason. You just be like, oh, it was the right time, whatever. I found that very healthy people don't inundate you with questions, right? They might say something like, "Oh, well, that's really cool that you're doing what's best for your family. I hope things work out," and they're genuinely happy for you, and they just kind of like leave you to process things on your own, and they trust that you know what you're doing. But somebody who is a manipulative and unhealthy person is going to want to dig details out of you and do it from the perspective of control. Again, there's nothing wrong with being curious. A good friend might, be curious about, gosh, and it seems kind of like out of the blue, make sure everything's okay. But there's a difference between asking questions out of concern and asking questions out of control. All right. So I would love to hear from you in the comment section. Have you done this before? How did it help? What are some other defensive strategies that you think can help you as you try to navigate your way out of a spiritually abusive environment or unhealthy situation? All right. I hope you have a wonderful day that's filled with joy, and I will see you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.